How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. I am here to answer all of your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated it may be. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn all about it, and so I like to make myself available here in this space for anybody to ask me anything about politics, and you don't have to worry about getting ridiculed or judged or debated or roasted. I'm not here to get into fights with people. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. There's no such thing as a dumb question. I have definitely felt like people were judging me because of questions that I've asked about politics in the past, and I did not care for the way that felt. So now I am here to answer your questions about politics, and there's going to be no judgments, no roasting, no debating. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care if you didn't vote. I don't care if you're further to the left than me. I don't care if you're further to the right than me. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. I'm not here to get into fights with people. I'm not here to do debates and stuff like that. This is not one of those live streams where I just yell at you and tell you how stupid you are for the things that you think or anything. So you don't got to worry about getting judged. You don't got to worry about, if I ask this question, he's going to think I'm some sort of MAGA fascist, or, if I ask this question, he's going to think I'm some sort of libtard cuck. That is not what is going to happen here. I am here to answer all good faith questions about politics, and there'll be no judgment, there'll be no roasting, there'll be no ridicule, there will be no debate at all. Sometimes I get a little spicy if people are spicy with me in the comments, but I try my best to practice a sort of, extreme radical patience for everybody, regardless of if they, come at me. It's the Rocketeer. Happy Black Monday to you as well. And, I'm extremely concerned. That is my feeling this Monday. Coop Dog says, what do you think the best way to bring jobs to the U.S. would be? I mean, that is a really good question, Coop Dog. I can tell you pretty confidently that it's not these tariffs, because first of all, we don't have the infrastructure built for, creating all these jobs. Second of all, even if we did, those jobs would probably go to robots instead of humans. I think honestly we need to be, the Biden administration did an excellent job of expanding the workforce, and we had record low unemployment during the Biden administration. I don't think that we need the stick method, which is what tariffs are. Basically saying, like, if you want to get something from out of the country, we're going to punish you. Instead, let's invest in American industry, and what are the industries that we need to be expanding on? Things like green technology. That's what the Biden administration was doing, and that was, paying dividends. It was doing a great job. But I think, sort of like on the larger scale, like if we're going to zoom out 25, 50 years, something like that, we need to start thinking about a post-job society. Like, what if robots and AI do every job for us? Like, how are people supposed to, pay for food and rent and shit like that? And so things like universal basic income, things like rebalancing the economy so that 0.1% of the human beings that exist don't have 99% of all the assets and funds. I think that's probably the move, in the long run. The funniest guy ever says, how do you feel about the fraud that was going on in the government? The funniest guy ever? There is fraud and waste and abuse in the government, but that's not what Doge is doing. And I'm pretty confident that that's what you were asking about, like what Doge was doing. The things that Elon says he's finding are all lies. They have been debunked time and time again. What he's doing down is shutting down agencies that are investigating him, and he's shutting down agencies that help protect the 99% against the top 1%. Because he's part of the top 1%, and he doesn't want to live in a society where he has consequences for the things that he does, so he wants to shut down these agencies so that he can use and abuse the rest of us to his heart's content, and there'll never be any, any comeuppance. Lizzie says, hey, Jared, do you think the stock market crashing will affect everyone? I do think the stock market crashing will affect everyone. For I think it's something like every 10 points that the stock market goes down, that means that unemployment goes up like 5% or some shit like that. I forget that statistic. I read about that in The Big Short. But yeah, people are going to lose their jobs. Inflation is going to make it harder to buy the things that we need, like food and housing and electricity and things like that. So it's going to be a big double whammy of people not having jobs and other things being more expensive to get. And industries are going to be holding back on giving, raises and bonuses and stuff like that. So where you would need to get paid more money to pay for all of these things, companies are going to be very skittish. And when companies are skittish, they get very, small c conservative about the things that they spend money on. So if you work in certain industries that you were hoping for expansions, like the entertainment industry, for example, no one's buying anything. If you're a writer, if you're an actor, if you work in, as a PA or something like that, there are fewer productions for you to get on. And that's going to be across every industry, Allie B says, so I majored in political science with a minor in human rights, so now I'm anxious always. I am with you, Allie, and I'm not going to tell you that you are wrong to be anxious, because I think you are right to be anxious. But I would also say that it's not game over, and there's still work to be done. If you, if you feel anxious, one of the things that you can do is do some work to try to alleviate what is going on. Like make sure that you're putting pressure on your elected representatives, especially if they're Republicans. Make sure that you're talking to people and make sure that they understand what's really going on. Some people get really easily sucked into the, social media propaganda channels, and maybe they're being lied to about who's to blame for X, Y, or Z. Make sure that we are collecting as many human beings as we can to vote for Democrats in 2026. If we give Democrats the House and the Senate, and especially if we give them a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, and especially if we give them 67 seats in the Senate, we can stop the Trump administration in its tracks. Billy Buckeye Nation says, F the blue. So you don't like cops? Is that what's going on? Prod by Germs says, can I join? The answer is no, I don't have guests on my live streams. Lolly says, statistics and voter registration would say you've got a long road ahead of you. That is accurate, Lolly. We have a good chance of taking back the House. Most pollsters agree that we are most likely taking back the House. But as far as the Senate goes, it's not impossible. It's just it would take a lot of work. Are you a person who lives in a state that has one or two Republican senators? One or two of them are up for election in 2026. I actually don't think the math works out. I think it's always one senator, if any, in every election. So do you have it in you to do the work to try to get a Democrat in that seat instead? And what the pollsters and statistics will tell us is the amount of work that people have generally done in the past to get that accomplished. But maybe people are down for doing more than that, and that's what I advocate for. I advocate for people doing that extra work, and then maybe we can see, unprecedented changes in, our political makeup in the country, Coop Dog says, do you believe in any Republican viewpoints? Tell me a viewpoint that I should believe in, because honestly, I've been asked this question a bunch, and I just don't see the value in it. I don't see the value in a party that is saying, like, the way that we deal with crime is not addressing the root causes, but just paying, getting more police officers and harsher sentencing for people. I don't understand the value of a political party that thinks that trickle-down economics is still the move. It's like, that should be invalidating by itself. The fact that they are still hawking tax cuts for the rich and cuts for everybody else, like people that are fucking struggling out there, but it's the people that are eating lobster 3 meals a day that we got to give them some more fucking money. Like, tell me what I should think of as a good Republican policy, and we can talk about it, But as far as I can tell, it's just a big pile of garbage with maybe some, like, tiny bits of silver lining sewn in the middle of it. Let's see here. We are all hyped for the Simpsons 2025 April prediction. I don't know. I think what you're talking about is like The Simpsons tends to be able to predict things. Bradley G says the Democratic Party was the reason Trump was elected. No, that is not true, Bradley G. The reason why Trump was elected is because of propaganda, misinformation, manipulation by the billionaire class, and an incumbency bias that was felt by parties all around the globe. Mamba Loeb says, are you buying put options and not just bitching about tariffs? I mean, I have some Tesla shorts that are doing pretty good. Lizzie says, do you think the tariffs set is good for us? Like, bring back jobs, but how long will it take? I don't, Lizzie, because here's the thing. The kind of jobs that we could potentially get back to this country, they're not going to be the sort of things that happen in even 2 years, the way that Trump is predicting. Even if Trump was right and we would get all those jobs back in 2 years, that's still 2 years where all of us are going to be struggling. All of us are going to be, we all feel the weight of the cost of living crisis, where, we are so worried. Anything could fucking set us off, if you need a repair on your house, if you have a medical emergency. And now all that's getting worse. Now all of that is getting worse. And we're all helping each other out so much already. I know 1,000 people who are living with their parents or are, getting roommates for the first time in a decade. And, that's all becoming worse. That's all becoming worse. Where the rich people that are good and kind are helping out their poor friends, but even they're going to be stretched, to the limits here. Let's see here. Lisa says, people understand that this won't be tomorrow. It'll just be a crisis. Yeah. User Gibbs XXX says, you don't want a Democrat representative take New Mexico, for example. No, I do. I think Democrats do way better generally than Republicans do. Your mom says, what university did you get your economics degree from? I got it from Your Mom U. Claire says, there's no such thing as American cars anymore, never will be. Modern cars have 30,000 parts. Completely accurate. Kristen says, we are a service economy. We don't need manufacturing jobs here. Yeah, but also those manufacturing jobs are probably going to go to robots and artificial intelligence. Dylan Barrera says, do you think that this is because of the last administration for it getting worse? No, the last administration was doing a great job. We had record low unemployment, record high stock markets. Inflation was coming back down from 9% to 2.4%. So yeah, I have not seen any cogent arguments for why a literal one-to-one cause and effect. Trump does the tariffs, the markets crash. But how can a human being justify that this is somehow a delayed reaction from the Biden administration? It seems like some real fucking, some real fucking rationalization core happening. Samurai Destroyer, good to see you again. What do you think of universal health care? I do support it. I also support universal health care. Tyro Pillar says, short-term pain for long-term pain. Completely accurate there. The economy was getting better. Completely agree. Easton Murr says, do you think the tariffs could be good? So here's the thing. Tariffs can be a good tool if you use it precisely, like a scalpel. It is not a sledgehammer. It is something you want to use delicately and precisely. What the Trump administration is doing doesn't even have the subtlety and care of a sledgehammer. It is like using a fucking wrecking ball or a nuclear bomb. So no, these tariffs are not going to do anything good unless you are, somebody who has shorted the market, or if you are a billionaire who can afford to, suffer through inflation, and, you live in a fucking gated community, so you're not worried about the rabble, fucking coming through there with their pitchforks and shit like that. Brandon, inflation up 6%, up 5%, up 4%, 5 to 2% doesn't mean inflation is down. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. You're saying inflation is up. Does it mean inflation is down? Yeah. Can you clear up your question there? Law Guy says, most of the smart people are buying right now. Tariffs rule. All right. Yeah, if that's what you want, buddy. But, when unemployment starts skyrocketing and the cost of living starts skyrocketing, hopefully you or the people that you care about will not be hurt by that. Strange Ike says, how are the tariffs bad? Everything pricing is down. No, you're looking at the stock market. Like, if you want to buy stocks, the costs are down right now, which is good if you are in a position to buy stocks. But almost everybody in America right now can't afford to buy stocks. They don't have expendable income. They barely make enough to save for a rainy day. Everybody is living fucking hand to mouth. And now you're making things more expensive and you're incentivizing companies to do more layoffs. Doesn't seem like a really good, markers for a healthy economy, my man. Ali says, do you think the Electoral College should be reformed? Absolutely, 100%. Let's see here. Yeah, everybody who's saying like, oh my God, there's a sale on stocks right now. Just like, show me how fucking elitist and privileged and out of touch you fucking are. That you think all these people who are fucking struggling with 3 jobs, working 80 hours a week, are now like, finally, I can finally buy some stocks. Now they're at an affordable cost. That was the thing that was causing me from not being an investor. It certainly wasn't the fact that I'm living hand to mouth and every single purchase I make is a struggle between, does this mean I can't pay rent? Does this mean I can't pay my electrical bill? Does this mean I can't pay my fucking medical bills, you know? But yeah, continue talking as though everybody is in the same fucking bucket as you, having all this expendable income. You're just proving my point that these tariffs are creating an economy for the billionaire class, which is all that Republicans ever fucking do, my man. Mamba Loeb says Trump is obviously doing this to force the Fed to cut rates. Econ 101, buddy boy. I mean, he's going to try, but I don't know if he can. The Fed is an independent agency, and the guy who's in charge of it does not seem amenable to being pushed around by the Trump administration. Hachi Loves You says, if you want to waste your money, buy stocks today. The stock market has not hit the bottom yet. Yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. Like, it is a gamble to put money into the market and expect a fast turnaround. Omer Fuderman says, is there any hope for the USA? Stuff seems grim. There's always hope, Omer, but here's the thing. The amount of hope that we can have is directly proportional to the amount of people that do the work to reverse all of this bullshit that is going on right now. If people are out there doing the work, putting pressure on their elected representatives, especially if they're Republican, if people are out there talking to their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, in real life and making sure that they're not part of the right-wing propaganda rabbit hole, and if people are out there getting votes for Democrats in the midterms in 2026, then yeah, we have a lot of cause to be hopeful. But if all of us who are just worried about this shit just hide under the covers and hope that somebody comes and saves us, then no, there is no hope. We're completely fucked in that case. Emma says, as long as you're doing well and you still got rights, that's all that matters. Emma, I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Let's see here. This person is spamming with Trump is king and a bunch of heart emojis. That's example of the kind of comment that would get you blocked. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but just ask a question, be part of the conversation. Samurai Destroyer says, do you agree that even if you have universal healthcare, there's a big issue where it has nothing to do with healthcare costs, but rather citizens making bad decisions and have overall bad health? You know, Samurai Destroyer, there's a conservative argument that puts a lot of the onus of the things that are wrong with society and culture on individuals as opposed to the systems that are surrounding those individuals. For example, like you want to talk trash about a person who just eats junk food, but maybe they live in a food desert and they literally don't have any vegetables available to them. Or, you know, you want to talk about subsidies for companies that put out, you know, like a bunch of garbage for people to eat, and vegetables and shit are really expensive. Additionally, sometimes people are struggling, working fucking 80 hours a week at 3 different jobs for not enough pay, and they can't really afford to go shopping for food and then cook a meal at home. Like, they have to eat fast food or junk food just as a cause of the situation that they are in. When you have been paying attention to what the rich pieces of shit have been doing for a long time, you start seeing the ways that they try to influence the conversation in a way that takes the responsibility out of their hands. The same shit happened with fucking recycling, you know, where everybody was told, like, oh my god, these giant corporations are poisoning us with all this, you know, fucking plastics and garbage is in our water and, you know, in our air and shit like that. And then these companies went out and said, no, we can solve the problem if you guys just recycle. It'd be great if you guys recycle and you guys turn off your air conditioners and you guys do all the work. Then yeah, we can definitely solve this problem. And then everybody starts being like, okay, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy some, you know, like reusable paper towels and, you know, I'll bring my own bag to the grocery store and shit like that. But meanwhile, 90% of the pollution is still coming out of these giant corporations that have not done anything to tailor their thing, you know? So yeah, I am wary. I'm extremely sus of any argument that tries to say that it is people's individual responsibility that needs to change, that needs to be the cause of the change, as opposed to regulating these giant fucking industries and these billionaires who've been taking advantage of us for fucking decades. Law Guy says, who will be the next Democratic leader? I don't know. I don't really do predictions. I like the progressive side, so I hope it's one of the young progressives. Italiana74 says, I'm a Dodger fan, but shocked they went to the White House, but hey, it is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really follow sports, but also no human being should be doing these fucking honorifics where you win, a series or something, and then you get to go to the White House. If that was me, I would go there and tell him he's a fucking piece of shit to his face. Malik B, who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballot. Noodle the Doodle says, I really want Pete Buttigieg. I think Pete's great. Apple user 235 says, so you support deindustrializing America. I honestly don't know what you mean by that. You're saying so you support deindustrialization like there was something that I said that made it seem like I supported deindustrialization. So clean up your question, my man. Kim Wash says, do you think we will be successful in impeachment? So for impeachment, all you need is half of the House. I think it is unlikely that we're going to get a lot of Republican defectors who agree with articles of impeachment. I also don't think that Mike Johnson is even going to let that come up for a vote. What I think is much more likely is that we take the House in the midterms and then have successful impeachment then. But can we remove him from office? We would need 67 Democratic senators, and that would take a lot of work. And I think it is work that we have in us. I think we can do that work if people just recognize that that is what they have to do. And so if you live in a state with a Republican governor who's up for election in 2026, go out there and do the work, man. Go out there and do the work of convincing people to vote for the Democrat instead. Even Courtney says, crazy how people think what's going on is a bad thing. It is a bad thing, Evan Courtney. It is. Crazy that people like you are trying to gaslight us into thinking that it's fine. Let's see here. Emily in the city says, but the corrupt Senate would not pass it. I mean, if it's all Democrats, they would pass it, R. Barn says, GOP will never win again. That's inaccurate, R. Barn, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the electoral system in our country is weighted to support Republican candidates. It is easier for Republicans to get elected because of things like the Electoral College, the Senate map, and gerrymandering. Also, Republicans are in league with the billionaire class, and the billionaire class has a lot of influence over the information that we receive, either through media, mainstream media, legacy media, right-wing media, whatever, or social media. The billionaires own all of the social media channels, and additionally, social media is really easy to manipulate if you have a lot of money, influence, and power, which the billionaire class does. So regardless of how bad everything gets, Republicans can still easily win elections again because everything is sort of like arranged to make it easy for them to win elections. So don't be overly confident that the GOP is going to implode or that they're going to lose elections. Do the work. Do the work. I saw this on Third Rock from the Sun, where they're like, if you want to hit someone in the face, aim for the back of the head. If we want to get 67 seats, let's aim for 100 seats. If you want to get a House majority, let's go for for 100% of the House and see what we can get. Let's see here. Candle Rock says, how will isolating the USA from its allies make America great? It won't. I know that you probably think that also, but yeah, I don't really have a lot to expand on. You kind of nailed it. Aries Baby says, what is the process for a president to get elected 3 times? So there's no process, Aries Baby. It is illegal and unconstitutional for a president to serve more than 2 terms. There are ways that Trump could try to finagle a 3rd term. I think the most likely scenario is that he declares martial law and cancels elections and then dares either the Republicans in Congress or the Supreme Court to try to stop him. I think a military coup is probably a likely outcome because he fired the heads of all the branches of the military, including the head of the Joint Chiefs. And his plan is to install loyalists in those seats. Now, whether or not the chain of the command will hold and people will do the illegal things that those, Trump loyalists will tell them to do is an open question. But yeah, he could petition this. He could petition the Supreme Court. He could petition Congress for a waiver. There's a lot of ways that he could try to finagle it. None of which are legal or ethical or constitutional. Apple user says a military coup in America. Laughy face. Yeah, it's possible. Everything's possible, my man. A Beer 6 says anyone that tries to play around Constitution is a threat. Yeah, I mean, I think that it makes him completely, I think it makes him, it invalidates him, in my opinion. But, 77 million Americans did not agree with me on that. Let's see here. Live Boxing says, what's the best type of government once AI takes over most of the jobs? Thanks. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think we need to start restructuring society around not having a job, with things like universal basic income. Bit Nevo says John Roberts must face trial if the Constitution is to continue to exist. I mean, I agree that John Roberts is a real piece of shit and that a lot of this is his fault, but I don't see where there's a case against him, April says, should I actually buy stocks? I am not going to tell anybody any advice on what to do because the stock market is it is a chaos machine right now. So you don't know if Trump is going to cancel these tariffs tomorrow or never. The stocks could just continue cratering. They could go, reverse. We had a blip today because some fucking idiot blue check mark decided to tweet out a fake story about how Trump was pausing all the tariffs for 90 days. So the stocks shot up again, but then they realized that it was wrong. They shot back down again. So it's like, I don't know, man. Do you like gambling? Because that's the move right there. Kim Wash says, after successful impeachment, would be stuck with his administration. Would they have to go? I'm not really sure what you mean. If Trump gets successfully impeached and the Senate votes to remove him from office, then yes, he would have to go. Liberals suck, says boo-hoo, Trump is not a convicted felon. I mean, he literally is, though. That's an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. I do not care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. Badger75 says gerrymandering is politicians choosing voters instead of voters choosing politicians. Completely agree with that. Michael says social media to blame for modern political climate. Also completely agree with that. Let's see here. Samurai Destroyer says, do you think billionaires influence and fund Democratic Party? They 100% do, but there's a big difference between the influence that billionaires have on the Republican Party versus the influence they have on the Democratic Party. First of all, the platforms themselves are different. The platform of the Republican Party is a wish list for the billionaire class. The platform for the Democratic Party is not a wish list for the billionaire class. They talk about things like raising taxes on the rich, raising taxes on giant profitable corporations, removing subsidies from giant profitable corporations, and regulating those corporations to make sure that they don't poison our air and our food and our medicines and shit like that. Billionaires hate that shit because they want to be able to poison us so long as it makes them 1 penny richer. So any billionaire that gives to the Democratic Party is doing so at risk of their own fortune. Any billionaire that gives to the Republican Party is doing so because of their own self-interest, because they want to be richer. And that by itself changes the dynamic of those donations. The donations that go to the Democratic Party from the billionaires are Warren Buffett is saying shit like, tax me more, raise my taxes, please. So yeah, it's different. But also there's a difference in scale also, where most billionaire donations go to Republicans. In 2024, it was 75% of all billionaire donations went to the Republican Party. Blanca Catherine says, do you believe if Kamala tried to run again, she'd have a better chance this round? I'm not really sure. A lot of people have negative feelings about Kamala. It's possible that part of the reason why she lost is, an inherent sexism and racism and misogyny that we have here in America. So yeah, a lot of people are not going to want to take that chance. But again, it's going to be up to the primary voters. The primary is who decides who runs on the ticket. Robert Castro says, I want to believe my brothers and sisters in the service would not obey an unlawful order like that, but that's a rough belief. Yeah, I also am not so worried about, there's a lot of people, in the military. There's a lot of places where the order can be, ignored or, legally ignored. I'm sure you know more about it than I do, Robert. But yeah, it is terrifying. I don't think you need a lot of people to do a military coup. So it's not about which percentage agrees to do this shit versus which doesn't. It's, does he have a critical mass of people who are willing to go along with the, fascist takeover. Greg says, why is ignorance cool now? I believe that, number one, Republicans defunding education has made it so that most people struggle with concepts that you learn when you get an education. But also, there's if you read, there's a book called Dark Money where they talk about the influence that billionaires have had over our culture and our zeitgeist. And I think, and that's one of the narratives that they're trying to push, is that if you have a college degree, it doesn't mean that you know better than another person. If you're educated, if you read books, that doesn't mean that you know better than other people. Everybody his opinion is just as valid. Even somebody who has never worked in medicine could probably have a really great opinion about whether or not your kids should get vaccines and shit like that, you know? So I view this stuff as completely inorganic, astroturf, propaganda narratives propped up by the billionaire class. Tyler Cullen says, what is your opinion on a flat tax for an income tax? Flat tax is a giveaway to the billionaire class. It's basically saying that, the billionaire are going to pay the same percentage as, a poor person, but that money means a lot less to you than it does the poor person. So a 5% tax that a poor person has to pay is enormous versus the 5% tax that a billionaire pays. Even though it's more money, it still makes a lot less of a difference because the remaining money that he has is so much more than what the poor person has. It doesn't make that big of a difference. Danny says, I'm hoping he pauses tariffs so we can breathe for a minute. I don't know. I don't know, Danny, because then there's just the worry that he's going to do it again, Every industry right now is keeping their powder dry because they have no fucking idea what to do. A corporation could be like, well, I'm gonna build my plant here in America now so that I don't get tariffed. But what if those tariffs get canceled? Then he's like, wow, fuck me, man. I just built this whole fucking plant here, and I can, all my competitors are getting that shit out of Mexico for 1,000 times cheaper. Juicy Squid 3 says, what do you think about Russia being left off of the reciprocal tariffs? I think that's evidence that Trump is a Russian plant, but I have to admit that they do have a relatively reasonable explanation for it, where that they're using that as a bargaining chip for peace with Ukraine. I don't really buy it because, I don't really think the Trump administration gives a shit about Ukraine or peace. I think it was up to them and there were no political consequences to it. They would just let Russia fucking run ramshod over Ukraine and potentially even send Russia money and weapons. But yeah, it is plausible. It is a plausible excuse to leave Russia out of that as a negotiating tactic. Danny says, didn't he tariff Ukraine? I believe he did. I 100% believe he did, but I don't know for 100%, so I would give that a Google. Tino says, I wouldn't care about Ukraine either, to be honest. I mean, I think you should, it's for global peace is the goal, whereas if Russia just keeps on taking over countries, eventually they're going to set their sights on us, and then we're going to have to go to war with a nuclear power, which is going to be not an ideal situation. Claire says, what's happening with all the court orders to stop shutting down agencies they are just ignoring? So some of those orders are being ignored and some of those orders are being appealed. And so where, they'll get an order to stop doing something, then they'll say like, oh, I told them to stop doing something, but then they just, they didn't have the money to keep doing that thing, like they're using the chaos of what Elon Musk and Doge is doing to accomplish their general goal without actually saying to the judiciary, fuck off. But a lot of these decisions are just being kicked up to the Supreme Court, and then we will see whether or not the piece of shit right-wing Supreme Court actually upholds this stuff, or if they try to put a check on the Trump administration, Let's see here. Greg says, do you think the Mariners, that's not a question about politics. Tino says, I just think that the president there, I can't spell his name, is keeping the war going for the money. That's completely inaccurate, Tino. And I don't know if you got that from some propaganda that you saw on the internet or if you are specifically here to spread that propaganda, but it is factually inaccurate to say that that is what Zelensky is doing. Zelensky is just trying to protect his country and his people. Let's see here. Sports Bag Breaks says, did you get your booster? Yeah, I get my boosters every October. Jojo said, I heard Trump may be putting a 90-day pause on tariffs except for China. Yeah, that has been debunked already, Jojo. Reese Rude says, did you like the outcome of the election? No, I did not. Io Kim Sarkona says, do you think if people could change their mind, they would have picked Harris now? Yeah, I mean, I don't need to think that. The Google reported that searches for can I change my vote spiked after Trump had won. Tino says, we gave him much money and he didn't do anything with it respectfully. No, he did. He protected his fucking country, and they were at a stalemate, basically, because of the help that we gave to Ukraine. Whereas if without our help, Russia would have completely taken over Ukraine at this point. And then he would continue into Poland or some EU nation, some NATO nation, and we would be contractually obligated to assist in that war, and then we would be in a conflict with a nuclear power. Let's see here. Noop says, who do you think is fit to run as president? That's a really big question. Lots of people. Digital Micah says, today's order to release prisoner by midnight will be the biggest test. Yes, that is accurate, Digital Micah. For those of you who may not know, so there's a guy who was sent to this, fucking concentration camp in El Salvador, along with a bunch of other people who were supposedly illegals, who had done crimes, or maybe were part of a gang called Tren de Aragua. Here's the thing. The Trump administration has not provided any evidence that the people that they sent were here illegally. They have not provided any evidence that the people have committed any crimes. And this person specifically, they have admitted that he was a legal citizen and did not do any crime. So they admitted that they sent this guy to a concentration camp in El Salvador, a brutal concentration camp that is famous for violence and starving its prisoners. They sent a guy there who's completely innocent, legal citizen of this country. And then they said, we can't bring him back. And the judge said, you have to bring him back. You admitted that it was your fault, that you did it accidentally. You have to bring him back. Like, what the fuck? And then they said, well, it'd be really hard, And so a judge basically said, you have until midnight tonight to bring him back. And we'll see. We'll see what happens, Silas says, I'm a Republican and I'm giving you the chance to change my mind. Okay, Silas, what is the most important issue to you? Tino says, opinion on the deportation. Deportation can be a good thing. You have to just do it correctly. The way that Democrats in the past have done deportations have been specifically targeting violent criminals or people that have just recently been found to be illegal, so they hadn't, set down roots and become, good standing members of society, The way Trump administration is doing it is, number one, they're making legal immigration almost impossible unless you are rich. So it's increasing illegal immigration. And also, they're just rounding up whoever the fuck they think might be an illegal immigrant, even if they are citizens, even if they are veterans, even if they are Native Americans, even if they are green card holders. Additionally, they're deporting people for things that they said that they don't like, which is an obvious First Amendment violation. So all you people out there who were worried about the First Amendment, like the Trump is literally stomping all over it. You guys should be fucking up in arms about it. All right, Silas, the most important issue to me is having lower costs. Okay, well, I guess my thing then would be to say to you that costs were coming, the inflation was going down during the Biden administration, and costs are now going back up, and inflation is now going back up during the Trump administration. So if you end up spending more in the next 3 years on goods and things than you did during the Biden administration, would that convince you to vote for Democrats in the future? I also have a much longer speech that I could give about the reason why the inflation that happened during the Biden administration was Trump's fault. But, we'll start there. We'll start small. Let's see here. Mahid says Netanyahu is the president of the U.S. That is completely inaccurate. Tino says the prices are going down. No, the prices are going up right now. Thanks to Trump. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Samurai Destroyer says, I mean, you can be educated. Doesn't mean you are right for the job or capable of the job. Yeah, Samurai Destroyer, it seems like you are kind of misinterpreting the things that I was saying. All I was saying was that the right-wing propaganda was that you can't trust people who are quote-unquote experts on things. Let's see here. Silas says, yes, it will. I just want a better USA. All right, great, sweet. So we'll see. We will see. When the economy continues to crash and prices start fucking going up like crazy and unemployment starts going up like crazy, Silas, we will see how you feel about that. Come back and tell me. I say completely open to you, having misgivings still or having further questions. Vic says recession to refinance $9 trillion in debt. I've heard that before from a commenter on my live stream, but I literally have not read it anywhere else. It makes me feel like it's a little sus, in my opinion. If I'm a regular news consumer, particularly around politics, and I haven't heard that theory anywhere else, it's probably bullshit. Let's see here. They'll just take the tariff hit in UK wages 35 per year, 70K. Not sure what that means. Reese Root says, Krista, bro, you are saying random shit. What is bro saying? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Jessica says, how do you feel about Trump cutting money to Planned Parenthood despite the abortion rate being 3% of services? So Planned Parenthood has for a long time been a political punching bag for the right. They provide abortions, that is true, but that is not, what they do. 97% of what they do is not abortion. But that's the way that they talk about it. In reality, Republicans don't like Planned Parenthood because they provide health care to people who can't afford health care otherwise. And they want poor people to suffer. And they don't care if poor people just fucking die. So yeah, it's unconscionable, but it's also exactly what we thought was going to happen. The Trump administration is doing everything that they can to fuck over the 99%, and particularly women. And so and they want to curry favor amongst their base. Like, they're going to see Trump going after Planned Parenthood, and they're going to be like, oh my God, he's doing such a great job of stopping abortions from happening, even though that's, complete and utter bullshit. Stoner Punk says, is there any way Trump run again? Where'd you just go, Stoner? I was just looking at your question. Oh, sorry, I just lost it, Stoner. Sorry about that. Oh, there it is. I really hope not, as Stoner Punks. So there's no legal or constitutional way, but there are sketchy ways that he could. And the way that we stop that is by being activated and organized and paying attention and talking to people in real life and doing the work of putting pressure on our political candidates, doing the work to elect Democrats in 2026. Victoria Ross says, we are going back to blue. I know this as a fact. Vic, I don't know what you mean by that, but also you can't be that confident, because it's that confidence that kills us. It's that confidence that makes it seem like we don't have to do the work, that we don't have to be talking to people and canvassing and getting up to vote for Democrats and calling our representatives all the fucking time. That work is essential. You can be confident, but still do the fucking work, man. Everybody's got to do the fucking work. Let's see here. Quint says, is a Hobbesian approach outdated? I gotta be honest, I'm not up on my Hobbes. I used to. When I was in college, I was, but I'm not anymore. Corey says, have you seen all the defenses of Trump's tariffs? Any of them make sense? They don't, but that doesn't matter. Like, the way that you win the propaganda war is you just flood the zone with as much bullshit as you possibly can. And people are going to fall for whatever one they fall for, whether it is, oh my God, stocks are at a discount now, so everything is good, or you don't need to buy things, like everybody in this country is, just don't get avocado toast, and you don't need the new iPhone and shit like that. Yeah, you should just buy a fucking chicken and start a farm, that way you don't have to pay tariffs on shit like that, So yeah, all of that stuff is, it's going to be shot at us through right-wing media and social media, and it is up to us to make sure that people don't buy it, that people don't get conned. Bit Nevo says they're trying to schedule a constitutional convention without the votes of all states. Thoughts? I'm not... I haven't heard anything about that. That's number one. But number two is... It's, I'm trying to think of, like, the way that would get enforced. If they did a constitutional convention without all of the states, it would not be a valid constitutional convention. They could vote on whatever they wanted to vote for. They could change the Constitution, but it would be invalid. It would be blatantly unconstitutional. If it went up to the Supreme Court, we had a regular-ass Supreme Court, they would say, that's unconstitutional, that doesn't count, this wasn't a real constitutional convention. Now, that being said, the current Supreme Court that we have they don't really give a shit about law or the Constitution. They just do whatever the fuck they want to do. There is a book by a law professor that is coming out called Lawless, How the Supreme Court is Running on Vibes, by a constitutional scholar named Leah Lippman. I haven't read it yet. It hasn't come out yet, but that's going to be basically talking about all that, how it's just based on vibes. But there do seem to be certain lines that even the Supreme Court won't cross. And if I had to bet, and I'm not confident about it, but I'm like 55-45 that even this Supreme Court would say you can't do a constitutional convention without all the states. Let's see here. Claire says I saw a bunch of MAGA people claiming Trump is playing chess and knows what he's doing. I mean, that's of course that's what we're gonna say, Claire. Phil Borchers says, here's a fact for the politics. Every politician is corrupt. It doesn't matter who you are. Phil, that is completely inaccurate. If you paint every politician with that same brush, all you're doing is giving cover for the worst actors. If you say they're all corrupt, it means that, the guy who's the most corrupt gets away with it. And that's completely fucking inaccurate. If you pay attention to who's in politics and you see the things that they do, it is clear that there are better politicians and there are worse politicians. There are more corrupt politicians and less or not corrupt politicians. There are politicians who lie a lot, politicians who lie a little, and politicians who don't lie at all. There's good political parties and bad political parties, Phil. And so when you say that, when you say shit like that, what you are doing is you're trying to get people to just fucking give up. You are doing the work of the billionaire class by making it seem like both parties are the same, Phil. And so I hope that you will stop saying shit like that. Aiden says, how do you think the Trump administration will approach the debt ceiling? That's a good question. The debt ceiling has always been kind of like a political football for the right, but only when the Democrats are in charge. So with the Republicans in charge, they'll probably just continue to expand the debt ceiling. My guess is that it won't be a fucking thing at all, Phil Borcher says, that's not true. Billionaire class is just corrupt as any other class. No, the billionaire class is worse than every other class, Phil Borchers. And I gotta be honest, Phil, you're coming across as somebody who doesn't give a shit about the truth and is just trying to spread pro-billionaire propaganda. Prove me wrong, Phil. I can't wait to be proven wrong. Off-Grid Minimalist says the Constitutional Convention only needs a quorum, or else one state could not show up and win. No, you need 2/3 of the state's representatives. So what they're saying they're going to do is they're just going to get, they're just going to have their states, the red states, do it, which would not be, a quorum. Let's see here. Brent Hansen says there's bad and worse political parties. I'm going to take objection to that, Brent, because I think that people have a worse idea of the Democratic Party than is actually the reality. I think people think the Republican Party is better than it is, and the Democratic Party is worse than it is. But I could argue this fucking 10 ways from Sunday. Like, people just don't know about the good things that the Democratic Party has done. And a lot of the complaints that they have about the Democratic Party are actually the fault of the Republican Party. People believe wrong things about the Democratic Party. There are people, very smart people, who believe that Democrats had opportunities to codify Roe in the past. That is inaccurate. That is fully inaccurate. But people view that as evidence that the Democratic Party is bad. People view Schumer and 10 other Democrats allowing the continuing resolution vote to happen just recently as evidence that Democrats are weak because they caved. That is a false narrative. It was not weakness or caving. It was trying to figure out which of two situations was better, two bad situations was better. And, it was a difficult call. I honestly can't tell you what the better move would have been. I'm kind of come down on the side that it would have been better if they shut down the government, but I still believe, it was a hard choice. It was a hard choice. And so to call it that they just caved is inaccurate anti-Democrat propaganda, of which there is a lot out there. I've got 1,000 examples of this. Reese Root says Kamala says she's going to do great things, but when she was in office for a few years, she did nothing. Reese, she did plenty of things when she was in office, when she was an AG, when she was a senator, when she was a DA, when she was vice president. Maybe you don't know about all the great things that she did, but she did lots of things. Let's see here. Also, she was vice president, so she was, she was hamstrung by not having as much power. Samurai Destroyer says, what do you think progressives who don't agree with you because they believe politicians are corrupt and don't agree that Harris lost due to sexism and racism, like they say Harris lost because of her being a corrupt robot? Everybody's allowed to have their opinion, I guess, but I guess I would say that there are progressive opinions about, like Kamala being a cop or, that she's a corporate robot or something like that are valid, and some of those criticisms are based in fiction, are based in unreality. And so, sometimes when you challenge people on this, they get very, they can get very caustic about it. Like you can hand them all the evidence in the world, but people don't like being proven wrong. So sometimes they get very, irked about that. So yeah, I try to be as open as I possibly can to people's journeys, to recognizing what's true and what's false. But I'm also not going to say that that things that they say that are wrong are right. Viraj says, what do you think of the offshore accounts on those inhabited islands? This sounds like propaganda, Viraj. It sounds like what you're saying is that the completely ridiculous and asinine tariffs that Trump put on uninhabited islands. Those inhabited islands is what you're saying, Viraj. Okay, tell me if I'm not answering the correct question here, Viraj. But yeah, offshore accounts on inhabited islands is just a way for billionaires to hide their money and store it away, like fucking, Smaug the Dragon from, The Hobbit and shit like that. Reese Roud says Kamala's whole mojo is women's rights. She doesn't care about anything else. That is inaccurate, Reese Roud. She also reduced recidivism rates in California. That has nothing to do with women's rights, So maybe don't say false blanket statements like that. Booju54321 says we're all skipping work to have a Tesla burning party today. I don't condone any kind of violence or destruction of property, but if you want to peacefully protest a Tesla, go for it. It's legal to short Tesla stocks. You can do that shit. Kim Wash says, Brian Schatz's Hawaiian senator blocked all Trump nominees. How long can the Senate keep them out? That I'm not 100% sure of. I read the story that Brian Schatz had done that, and I'm honestly I don't even know the fucking mechanism by which he is doing that. Maybe if he's on the Judiciary Committee, if he's talking about judges specifically, that he has the power to do that. But again, yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that it's all just delaying. He can't put a full stop to it. Let's see here. Sports Bag Break says he's talking about Epstein. I also don't know what that's about. Mag Nuggets said thoughts on golfing after tanking the economy and not attending the soldiers' transfers. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are wrong with Trump constantly golfing down at Mar-a-Lago. Number one, he's supposed to be working, right? But instead he's golfing more than any president in history. Number two, he's golfing at his golf club, which is putting money directly into his pocket because Secret Service needs to go along with him. And he is, funnily enough, always charging Secret Service 3 times the regular rate for their rooms. So he's just stealing money from American taxpayers and putting it into his fucking pockets. And also, he is golfing when he specifically should be doing things about crises that he has fucking caused. Like the economy fucking crashing, James Etrike says, I have an issue with MAGA telling us to be respectful, and I guess you call invading our capital as respectful. Yeah, this is the whole Republican ethos, is rules for thee, but not for thee. You have to, be courteous and respectful to us, but we are allowed to call you cuck, pedophile libtards who are eating children out of the basement of a pizzeria, and you're a Hillary Clinton stooge. You're not even real people. You're sheeple, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as we go around and say statistically, Republicans have less education, and they're like, shut up. Why would you call me dumb? Fuck you, you idiot. Reese Rude says, what do you think about Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk is a con man. He is a liar. He is 100% full of shit. He knows he's 100% full of shit. He constantly is saying things that are untrue just to perpetuate the right-wing narratives that he is trying to convince people are accurate. He and Ben Shapiro and fucking, Nick Fuentes, they're all part of the same fucking, soup of bullshit peddlers for money, in exchange for money. And some of these guys we know have gotten money from Russia in order to push all of this right-wing propaganda, which kind of makes you think, why is the Republican Party working in league with an adversarial nation run by a vicious dictator? Kind of makes you think, right? Kind of makes you think. Let's see here. Samurai Destroyer, why should a pro-life person support the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party? Excellent question, Samurai Destroyer. So here's the thing. There are ways that we can decrease the number of abortions. Making abortions illegal does not make that happen. All you do when you make abortions illegal is make abortions more dangerous for women, particularly poor women and women of color. The Republican Party doesn't give a shit about stopping abortion. If they did, they would do the preventative things to stop accidental pregnancies. And they would do the kinds of things that make it easier for people to raise children. Lowering costs for childcare, family planning, raising the minimum wage, the things that stop accidental pregnancies and the things that make it easier for people to afford to actually have a kid. Republicans are firmly against all of that stuff. So they don't really give a shit about stopping abortion. What they want is for women to get accidentally pregnant and then for them to be forced to have the child. And the reason why they want that is because they want people to be desperate. They want people to not be able to organize or educate themselves. They want people to be so busy with their 3 jobs, working 80 hours a week, that they have to just do whatever their fucking bosses tell them to do. They have to take any kind of job they can get, regardless of how dangerous or low paying or demeaning, regardless of if their boss is sexually harassing them. And, when you're so busy just trying to survive, you don't have time to read the news or go to college or organize or protest or vote and shit like that. It is a lot easier to strike when you have exposable income. And if you just remove all the exposable income from people, then they suddenly have a lot less ability to strike. If you want to cut down on the number of abortions, then you should vote for Democrats who will do the things to actually decrease abortion. But making it illegal doesn't actually do that. It's just hurting women. That's all it's doing. Brett Hansen says, agreed, they're taking the wrong approach, but there are some heavy accusations. These are some heavy accusations that have zero factual basis. Brent, I am looking at the actions of the Republican Party, and I'm trying to figure out why they would do the things that they are doing, and this is the only thing that I can see as the possibility. Additionally, if you read into this stuff, again, I'm reading this book called Dark Money about how the billionaire class has been trying to hijack our politics for decades, you will see that they are explicit about it. You will see that that is their entire fucking goal, Let's see here. Health, education, family planning, reducing poverty will decrease abortions. Completely agree with that. Reese Rude says, but the Democratic Party wants to just give money to poor people when they didn't work. So Reese Rude, that is a propaganda narrative perpetuated by the billionaire class. What the billionaire class is trying to do is paint poor people as people that are having like a failure of character. They're saying, listen, you worked hard to be able to afford food on the table and to be able to afford your house and shit like that. And there's a bunch of freeloaders out there who are just sitting on the fucking beach and they're taking your tax dollars. So that's a billionaire propaganda narrative that is completely inaccurate. The reason why they want to spread that narrative is to kill social safety net programs because rich people are responsible for paying for social safety net programs. The reason why we want to tax the rich is so that we can fund things like Medicare and Medicaid and welfare and food stamps and all that kind of shit. Because when you don't have those, then you have people living on the street, which everybody fucking hates. I hate it as a moral thing. But also, if you're a piece of shit who lives in a nice neighborhood and suddenly there's a dude camping on the grass, you're like, oh no, there's a homeless person in my yard. Ooh, yeah. So everybody hates that, regardless of your motivations are good or not. Additionally, it is bad for public health because people living on the street tend to be more susceptible to getting diseases and shit like that. And so that's going to affect even rich people too. And when people are struggling, they do more crime. And, I could make the argument that that's what Republicans want because when there's more crime, then people tend to vote for more authoritarian policies like increasing the police and harsher sentencing and shit like that. And then we just further live in a police state that is, ruled by the billionaire class. But yeah, that's where that narrative entirely fucking comes from. And it's again, it's not accurate. If a person is struggling, that is not their choice. People work their asses off to get out of poverty. And the Republican Party is just fucking pushing them fucking back down. And the billionaire class is just fucking pushing them back down. No matter how hard they work, they're like, sorry, pal, you're still back down there. Go suck a fucking butthole, my man. Let's see here. Some Nugget says, why are red hats so against taxing billionaires more, but blaming it on the Democrats? So there's 2 things going on there, at least 2 things. Number one is, everything that the right says is actually an accusation. Every criticism is actually an accusation where, if you, accuse the other party of doing the thing that you are doing, when the other party accurately says that you are doing the thing that you have accused them of, what you make it seem like to the casual observer is that, this is just what politicians do. They all call each other corrupt. They all call each other Nazis. That's just the thing, regardless of if one party actually has a claim. What the fuck? I got suspended from going live. Why was my access removed? Misinformation. I do not agree with this decision. My live does not contain the content. Okay. Well, sorry to everybody, sorry to everybody else who's watching. Have a really hard time doing this here. Well, yeah, looks like I'm fucked for a little while at least. Yeah, for some reason this is not allowing me to finish filing my appeal, which is very upsetting. Okie dokie. Well, I close that. Yeah, I'm going to get into some more of these comments here, but submit appeal. Submit. Appeal submitted. All right. Well, let's see here. Where were we at timing-wise? All right, we were about an hour, so, not too bad. Every accusation is a confession. All right, yeah, we just got to find out and see if I'm going to be able to get fucking back online, back to doing my lives again on TikTok. That's a fucking bummer. But again, this is just the thing that Republicans do to me. They like to take my channel down because they don't like it when I speak the truth about shit like that. All right, let's see here. Samurai Destroyer, I would say I'm right-leaning, but I would not say that to any Democrats, even though I disagree with Democrats. Yeah, Samurai Destroyer, I've always found your what do you call it? Your policy preferences to be really interesting. When you first popped on my Twitch here, I do like digging into this stuff, and I'm wondering if I've said anything that is convincing you even a little bit. All right, well, it looks like the live's over today, everybody. I'm going to give this a quick check to see if my ban was removed. But if not, I'm just going to have to fucking dip out of here, everybody. Yeah, Tyro. R.I.P. indeed. Okay, did I win my appeal? Not yet. Alright, well, I guess we'll fucking see. This might kill my, the next entire fucking week of my lives, Alright, guys. Yeah, to my fans over on Twitch and on YouTube, I want to find out a way to continue doing this without TikTok. But the fact of the matter is I get most of my questions off of TikTok. And I do not want to put y'all, just probably 10 of you or something like that, in the position of having to, artificially, hype up my my channel. I'm thinking about maybe doing something where I just kind of monologize without questions and maybe see if that, can keep my activity to, keep my activity up, regardless of if I'm on TikTok or not. But, we will see. We'll see what happens. Make a backup account. Tyro, that's actually it's not a bad idea, Tyro, but, I worry about starting from scratch. I got 145K. My lives tend to do about 180 people at any given moment. It's just going to be a real fucking bummer if I got to do 5 people here, and then also 5 people on TikTok, But we'll see. It's a really good idea, Tyro. I will definitely consider it. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Join the Patreon. Do the work. And I will see you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye. Goodbye.